everybody, my name's Blind, and this is a Dwarf Fortress Let's Play. I don't generally do these, I'm more of a Twitch streamer personally. You can find my links down in the description. However, because I've received a copy of Dwarf Fortress early, I figured that it would be a good idea to do a beginner's focused Let's Play. So I've had some time with the game now, and I've kind of familiarized myself with the new UI, and I wanted to do a short series of videos on playing the game. This is essentially going to be a Let's Play, except I'm going to be taking things slowly and explaining things as densely as possible. I'm going to try and give you enough information so that you yourself, after watching this video, or maybe this small series of videos, I will hopefully have given you enough information that you will be able to dive in and play the game yourself with minimal friction. Dwarf Fortress is a very wide game. There's a lot of things to learn and a lot of things to know. I'm still learning things, and I've got thousands of hours in this game. However, you only actually need to know a small number of fundamentals in order to have a relatively functional fortress. If you've played games like RimWorld before, Dwarf Fortress isn't intentionally trying to kill you. Dwarf Fortress is more a game about simply experiencing a narrative that you craft for yourself. Of course, you can make the game very difficult if you wish. There's lots of ways to do this. But, just by its default, if played in a relatively careful fashion, you can have a very peaceful experience. Something that is introduced in this most recent version that wasn't in previous versions are game difficulty. We're going to dive in and generate a world. Now, it's going to give you this little welcome menu, but that's fine. Now, my preferred style of play is either sparse or frequent mineral resources. Now, the reason for this is, by default, the game leaves this on everywhere. If you play with the default on, there's going to be so many resources that you're going to be tripping over various different rare metals, which is important for long-term fortress survival, but to me kind of ruins the immersion a little bit. So we're just going to leave this on frequent. Savagery is kind of the average evilness of the world that you're going to get. So the more savagery, the more frequent big beasts and large scary things and evil, not beasts necessarily, because that's the beast one right above it, but the higher the savagery, the more tendency the world's going to have to create evil things that are going to come after you. Number of beasts is the number of large creatures that spawn. These guys are quite fun. That's things like dragons and giants. And while they can be quite the threat to a new player if you're rather experienced, they're not always the biggest threat. They are generally just kind of like a fun toy to play with. We're going to leave that on default. Number of sites is the number of towns that each civilization spawns, or number of fortresses in the case of the dwarves, or number of pits in the case of the goblins. Sites is important, but we're again just going to leave that on default. Number of civilizations, I'm also going to move this one up to high. I like having a variety of options of different civilizations to settle with. Because this is Dwarf Fortress and we're playing dwarves primarily, that is going to be kind of your indicator of number of characters that you can play as in Dwarf Fortress. We're also just going to leave the world on medium so that it doesn't take too long, and 100 years is a good starting point. The younger your world, the more beasts will be alive, because they will have had less time to get killed by things just out in the wild. And the older your world, the more kind of dark and brooding creatures you're going to get. If you want to go full crazy, you can open up detailed mode and start making and start tweaking the very, very, very world gen fundamentals of the game, but we're not going to worry about the amount of rainfall right now, and instead just give us a nice basic world generation. So let's get the world generating, shall we? Now, for anybody who is brand new to the game, you may have heard that the world generation used to take a really long time. Or maybe you played the game previously and experienced 4-hour world generation. Well, fortunately, that's a thing of the past. World generation actually is quite quick now, to the point where I can generate a 1,000-year-old world in about 20 minutes on my computer. Granted, I do have a rather nice PC. So if we pause this, we can actually see, and if it pauses, there we go. If we pause this, we can actually see the legends spawning in real time. Now, I do have a video on legends on this channel if you wish to learn how to, kind of get a decent amount of storytelling out of legends. We're not going to be diving into legends today. We're just generating the one world and picking a spot and going ham. But just so that you know, you can pause and you can see events happening in real time here. So it looks like in the midwinter of 24, the Marsh Titan hideous ships, the Sea of Heather, was struck down by a goblin in stolen scales. This is what I mean by the younger the world you generate, the more titans will be alive and the less will be dead. Just like as an example, a druid of the Young Shores was appointed in year 1, which is kind of like the Elven Kings, and lots of elf activity here. Plenty of people to mess around with. So we're going to let the world continue generating now. Let's see what happens. Another druid was appointed in the year 54. The Worshipful Doom of the Increased Mounted Fox was founded. So that's like a location was founded by a group. The Feverish Waxy Curse of the Incinerated Wax was destroyed in Menestream, whatever that means. Plenty plenty of exciting events happening. Let's see if we can spot any creatures dying or big monsters. We're already on year 90. See, world generation's almost done. And this isn't a small world either. This is about the speed that the much smaller worlds used to take. So it's quite nice to have world gen at a good speed like this, so I don't need to edit this out. Now, we can look around our world a little bit and take a peek. We're going to be doing a little bit more of this in a moment when we click play now, but if we decide we didn't like this world for some reason, we could return to the main menu, or we can just simply click play now. And obviously, we can use WASD to look around, and if we click play now, we'll be able to zoom in. So let's do that. So, in case you're completely inexperienced with Dwarf Fortress, Dwarf Fortress, in Fortress mode specifically, is a colony management game about keeping dwarves alive. And so our goal, we're going to skip the tutorial because we don't need that, our goal is to pick the best location for our dwarves, select a location that would be fun to settle in, and then embark with our dwarves. We're not going to be preparing carefully in this video, which is something that people like to do, essentially allows you to be very granular with what you actually bring with you. But in this video, we're just going to be embarking and kind of calling it. So if we zoom in here, by clicking, we can get a detailed view of the map. We can zoom out by right-clicking. So over here on the right hand of the screen, up here in this little box, there's a lot of information. So let's kind of run through what that means. The Swamp of Dales, I'm assuming is what that means, of the Insightful Land. The Insightful Land is kind of this continent that we are on, and the Swamp of Dales is the location, so that particular tile. So if I zoom in, this is the Swamp of Dales. Located in the Swamp of Dales, a temperate freshwater marsh is our biome. Temperature is temperate, and trees are wooded. Other vegetation is moderate, and the surroundings are wilderness. There is a brook in this location, which is was probably this, or maybe this, potentially. And the brook has a name. And then beneath that, we can see there is shallow clay, very deep soil. So clay is these are all different crafting materials. Clay, very deep soil, a light aquifer, iron, gold, silver, copper, and zinc are all available in this zone, and a flux stone layer. So we could theoretically make steel here. However, keep in mind, in this area are goblins, more goblins, and more goblins, designated by these tiny little pits here. Over here, we have a bunch of human settlements, which are, generally not as hostile as goblins, but still not the friendliest. Down here, we have dwarves. These are some dwarven settlements around here. And if I look around in some forests, maybe I can spot some elves. So we've got more humans. Trying to spot some elves. Ah, there we go. So down here in these little forests, you can see these kind of little weird brown things. These are little elven forest retreats, and we also have these little forts on the map, these tiny little boxes, and the things that you really got to be wary about are towers. Make sure you don't settle near any towers. So we're going to look for our different factions now. So down here at the bottom, there are 3 different buttons. Find embark location. This is kind of like your searching screen. What kind of specific thing do you want? If you want to make sure you're not going to get an aquifer, you can say no aquifer on here. Or that's river. No aquifer, wherever aquifer went. No heavy aquifers and no light aquifers. Well, we'll just say that. So we're going to begin searching, and it's going to search the whole map for aquifers, and that's what this is doing right here. So all these yellow areas are areas that, have an aquifer, and all the green areas are areas that don't. So that's going to go through and do our search for us, and while that's running, the other button we're going to select is Choose Origin Civilization. So if you want, you can go into Legends and read about these, but it's going to jump and highlight your civilization of origin. So we have several different options here. We have the Greatest Clasps, we have the Torch of Webs, we have the Bright Nets, we have the Craft of Sieges, and we have the Hall of Adventuring. This is going to give us the faction's population and the number of sites they have. The Hall of Adventuring, that's a small civilization. 75 dwarves and 1 site. Not so great. 1,200 dwarves in the Craft of Sieges. The Bright Nets have 400. The Torch of Webs have 4,000 with 25 sites. And the Greatest Clasps have 1,500 with 24 sites. I think we are going to go with the Torch of Webs just due to the fact that they have the most overwhelming numbers. Now we have to look around here and try and find a spot without an aquifer. So if we look around here, what do we have? We got wilderness. So there's some things here that you're going to want to keep an eye on as a new player. You see how it says untamed wilds under surroundings when I look in this area? You might not want to settle in untamed wilds. Untamed wilds is mean enough that the general vicinity is just going to try and kill you as much as your enemies and other things in Dwarf Fortress. So maybe avoid untamed wilds if and when possible as a newbie. Something else to keep in mind are neighbors. So for this faction, I might actually be changing factions in a second here. For this faction, it seems like we are at war with the humans, and things don't seem too great. Also, okay, never mind. We're going to pick a different faction because there is a evil tower right there, and the humans are at war with okay, you know what? Screw it. We're instead of these guys, I think we're going to... Which one was the other big one down in the south? It was these guys, the Craft of Sieges. Yeah, I think that either the Craft of Sieges or the... Yeah, let's go with the Craft of Sieges. Let's see what these guys have around here. Okay, so these guys have a little bit more of a... a little bit of a temperate desert, some rocky wasteland. Okay, we can work with this. As long as, the world isn't full of murder zombies, I think that's probably pretty safe. That's wilderness. We can deal with wilderness. I was kind of hoping we'd find something that was calm for the sake of this series, but we can do wilderness. Wilderness isn't so bad. All right, so I quite like this. So something that you want to be looking for as a new player is you want to be looking for something that's temperate, wooded, with woodland, and either ideally calm, but apparently everything here is wilderness, so I guess we're going to be going with wilderness. Let's dive into here, kind of, and take a look at our options. So, because I'm kind of liking this general area, although I'm thinking that we got to try and avoid these aquifers. So I'm thinking about settling in this general vicinity, maybe even right there. It's got iron, copper, nickel, lead, and flux. And there's 2 biomes here. We got some rocky wasteland and some conifer forest, which is very nice and thickly wooded. But let's take a look at our elevation first. So we have 2 buttons down here. We have show cliffs and show elevation. So this is going to show general elevation relative to sea level. Of course, the darker the color, the higher up it is, and the bluer the color, the deeper it is, right? Of course, this goes down into ocean. This is kind of like a topographical map, if you will. And then we've got show cliffs and grades, and as you can see, there's actually a lot of cliff right there. So I think this might actually be a fun spot to embark. Now, when you pop up this embarking menu, the game does let you increase the size of it, and you can push this even larger within the game settings, although I don't recommend that you do that. Dwarf Fortress is a game that will run on any computer, within reason, but won't run well on any computer, just kind of in general. And this is both good and bad. It's good because it'll run on anything, but it's bad because it'll run bad on everything. So if you want the game to run terribly, feel free to crank that number up to 16 and do 16 by 16 embarks, but if your game runs bad, that's on you. Think of it kind of similarly to something like Cities Skylines, where if you use the 87 tiles mod, game's gonna run like butts on sandpaper. Okay? You got it? So make that bigger at your own risk. So with the lag caveats aside, it's time to embark. So what we're going to do is we're just simply going to select this tile right here with the 4x4 embark for best effect. Now, we are presented with this screen, and you are given the options of difficulty. These can be changed at any time in game. For your very first ever playthrough, maybe turn enemies off, but at the end of the day, it's up to you. Have as much fun or as little fun as you will. We're going to leave everything on normal just for the sake of this video. If you want instructions on how to prepare carefully, I have a video on this, and then you could click this link. Otherwise, let's dive in. So this is where we're going to get to know our dwarves. This is one of the most important parts of Dwarf Fortress. A dwarven outpost. You have arrived after a journey from the mountain homes into the forbidding wilderness beyond. Your harsh trek has finally ended, and your party of 7 is to make an outpost for the glory of all Rigoth Zokon. There is almost no supplies left, but with stout labor comes sustenance, whether by bolt, plow, or hook, provide for your dwarves. You are expecting a supply caravan just before the winter entombs you. But it is spring now, enough time to delve secure lodgings, ere the cougars get hungry. Oh, and they're hungry. A new chapter begins here at this place. Rifoth Flaloth. Blockaded bolted. Blocked bolted, not blockaded bolted. Blocked bolted. So our location is called Block Bolted. That is our home. So these are the lovely citizens of Blocked Bolted. The game begins paused by default. And if we press U, we can see a list of our dwarves. Now, you might see some older guides and people talking about be careful about assigning jobs. This version of the game, the new version of the game, is pretty lenient in that front. They've kind of gone in the direction of most dwarves will just kind of do anything. If you want to be a little bit more specific, we can fiddle with this later. But for right now, we're just going to kind of let them do their jobs. So if we look in our wagon, we're going to have a whole bunch of different materials that have come with us. We have some picks, some axes, some weapons. We have some maces, some spears, some swords, all made of copper, of course, as well as many different bottles of dwarven ale. Up here we have rough estimates. Eventually we'll be able to get better counts of the amount of stuff we have. Up here, you can if you hover over this little spot, you can see that we are currently an outpost. One of the big goals of Dwarf Fortress is becoming a mountain home and bringing the monarchs from your faction to this location. We are, of course, called Blockade Bolted, and we don't currently have any appraiser skill, and we don't currently have any value in the fortress, really, so all that information is blank. And then if we go into stocks as well, the game is insisting on showing me the tutorial. If we go into the stocks as well, you'll see that a lot of stuff just has estimations. They're not giving us specific numbers. Once again, it's because nobody's gone through and counted everything. And as we start to accrue stuff, nothing is going to be identified. We'll have to cover that later. So, currently we have a hunting dog. We have what looks like 2 cats. We have an alpaca, a buffalo, a second alpaca, a second buffalo. We can go to the full list of pets and livestock by pressing U, or going down here and clicking this button in the bottom left, and this will show us all of our pets and livestock. So we currently have 2 buffaloes. We have a peachick, which will grow up into a peacock, somebody's pet probably. We have 2 alpacas. We have a stray duck, 2 cats, and a hunting dog, and of course 2 other additional dogs. We don't have breeding pairs of cats, thankfully. We also don't have breeding pairs of dogs. Keep in mind that you can, of course, assign trainers to dogs to make them into more war dogs if we wanted to do that. We can also set them to be butchered, and we can also toggle them as pets. However, the thing is with cats, you can't assign them as pets because cats are one of the most advanced AIs in the game, naturally. We also have then orders and dead and missing, which is still empty. Now, I'm curious about this biome that we've spawned into here. There seems to be a little creek in the middle, which is beautiful, but we can zoom out by holding down Control and pulling back or towards you down on the mouse wheel. And if we go up, we can take a look at the surrounding zones. So we are on the edge of a badlands, which is kind of a desert, as well as on the edge of a temperate conifer forest, which is this lovely forested zone down here. And as we zoom out, we can kind of get an idea of what's around us. The game is still paused, of course. We are in the 15th of Granite in early spring of the year 100 of this world. We can look around and see there's ginkgo trees. The mouse acts as kind of like your eyes, so you can tell that this is a ginkgo tree based on the writing up here. We also have what looks like garden cress and some hemp plants, which can be made into clothing. Foxtail mullet, which can be brewed into alcohol. If we zoom out a little bit, we can see that there's a colony of honeybees growing? Existing. Colonizing? What do bees do? Anyway, we zoom out a little bit, we can see some sand, which is exciting. That can be made into glass, theoretically. And as we kind of scroll around this map and just kind of get our bearings, something else that we should probably check. If you press F1, by the way, takes you back to your wagon in case you get lost. Also, I think there are some buttons up here. Yeah, so you can click this button to recenter, or you can go to the lowest discovered area by clicking this button. And then, of course, you can zoom in and zoom out using these pluses and minuses as well. And if you want to have the ramp arrows on to see what goes up and what goes down, press R. So if you're looking at this and you're confused, let's just kind of run down the real basics of what you're looking at right now. Dwarf Fortress is kind of like flat Minecraft. This layer is one layer of blocks with a floor layer in between. Each layer of blocks has a very thin layer of flooring in between each layer of blocks. Think of it kind of like the grass tiles in Minecraft. You can dig into the side of blocks to remove that layer, but it won't remove the grass above unless you intentionally channel out the ceiling or dig down from above to remove the ceiling. We're probably going to end up settling in here somewhere or just underground and not going too deeply. That's not the point of this particular playthrough. The point of this particular playthrough is showing you that starting a fortress is quite easy. So, let's zoom in a little bit and take a look at our dwarves. So in Dwarf Fortress, every single dwarf has history, relationships, friends, and in a lot of cases, family and children, spouses, and their own set of items. So if we look at this particular dwarf, this is Meng, who's a fisher dwarf. We're going to have to get him a fishing workshop in a little bit so that we can actually use the fish that he's going to go catch. He's not anxious, but he is fearful in the face of imminent danger. His poor kinesthetic sense and poor social awareness. He's got no official position. He's not in a squad, but he is a proficient fighter. And he says we should all work together, which is true. We should. He has no health problems. And as for skills, we can look at various skills that they have. Labor is the most important. Combat's also very important. Social is a little bit less relevant. And then all the way down to knowledge, which is completely irrelevant gameplay-wise, but can lead to a lot of interesting storytelling. So here we can see that this dwarf is a competent poet, a competent musician, and an adequate stringed instrumentalist and a novice wind instrumentalist, which is a bit interesting. I quite like this dwarf so far. What else do we have? He has no rooms or anything assigned to him, and he's currently assigned as a fisher dwarf, which isn't the most useful at this given moment, although fishing is a very efficient source of food. I guess pun intended. I kind of wish that, we had another farmer or something like that. But that is fine. So we're now going to zoom out a little bit and click on another dwarf. Who else do we have here? We have a dwarf named Nil, who is a mason, and they disdain craft work. Not a big fan of crafts working. Then why are you a mason? Has a developed sense of empathy, has high social awareness, but is impatient, disdains family, and has no official position as well. Nobody's going to have an official position off the bat. And we can also take a peek at their personality if you want to dig deeper into any of these dwarves. Like this particular dwarf, she has a great sense of empathy and a great feel for social relationships and a lot of willpower. She is very impolite and inconsiderate of property, and she's made deeply uncomfortable by differences in appearance and culture, which is, not a big fan of elves, are you? She has a tendency to consider ideas and abstractions over practical applications, and she isn't particularly curious about the world. She doesn't cling tightly to ideas and is open to changing her mind, and she often feels discouraged. She's pleased by her own appearance and talents, and she tends to avoid crowds. She doesn't mind wearing something special now and again, and she tends to form only tenuous emotional bonds with others. She takes offered help and gifts without feeling particularly grateful, and she is not particularly interested in what others think of her. She generally finds herself to be quite hopeful about the future. And she chews her lips when she's angry, and she tenses up when she's nervous, and she laughs in a distinct fashion when she's exasperated. Needs alcohol to get through the working day, like any good dwarf. So, that's a keyword there. Alcohol. That's going to be our first goal for this episode, is acquiring and getting some alcohol running, which is pretty easy, but a little bit more tricky than maybe it could be. So we're going to start off by digging a little entryway. Now, dwarves need two things, really. Well, three things. They need booze, they need housing, and they need food. Those are the three things that they need: booze, housing, and food. In order to acquire booze, we have to acquire farming, or alternatively, we can use this tool down here, which says plant gathering. We can harvest these plants. Because we're in a temperate biome and there's plenty of things growing, we can actually get away with almost entirely living off of the local plant life that just grows naturally, as long as you're careful to pick it all before it snows, assuming it snows where you live. We also need to get some beds running, and beds are made out of wood. Only wood. Only wood. As much as the elves dislike it when we chop down all the trees, we're going to have to cut down at least a few to get started. So we're going to, because we just did the normal embark, we do have access to a lot of tools. So we're just going to let the dwarves do their thing, grab an axe and begin chopping down trees, and grab a pick and begin mining. And they're quite efficient with it too, which is actually quite nice. Now, as you can see, these ramps are left over, and if we move up a layer, we can actually see this hole that we are digging out slowly. So we kind of would like to, kind of get rid of that, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to remove these ramps and maybe put some roofing on top of it, just so it looks a little bit better. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the dig tool again, and we're going to click this button. This is the designate constructed walls and floors and other constructed objects be removed. So if we build something outside, we can remove it with this tool, or we can just simply remove these local ramps, which is what we're going to do right now. Now, as we are looking at these walls, we can see the different materials. We've got clay, we've got a little bit of stone, and we've got this sand. Not a big fan of sand. It is coarse and it gets everywhere. So I think now is the time to cover digging a few levels down so that we don't need to worry too much about this sand. However, this is a good spot to begin farming because sand allows stuff to grow. Clay, dirt, sand, anything that is like that you can put your hands into and pick up and dig in with a shovel probably can have food planted in it. So this is actually a pretty lucky find for the very beginning of a fort. Once again, if I move up one layer, we can kind of see this is around the edge. So I think this is where we're going to dig our little starting staircase. Now, I like to do fancy staircases, but we're not going to worry about that too much. For this video, we're just going to do a nice, like, kind of 3x3 down. And let's go, like 4 levels down. Stairs used to be super complicated in Dwarf Fortress. They aren't anymore. You literally just select the stair tool, select the number of stairs that you want, and then move down the number of layers you want to go, click when you're done, and that's it. There's no more fancy worrying about up, down, up, and all that up and down stair stuff. And that old DOS tactic video from years ago that has these fancy diagrams, while still mechanically relevant, isn't as important of a thing to worry about anymore. The next tool I'm going to show you about is priorities. So we're going to click on mining again, just the normal mining tool. And by default, priority is 4. We're going to set kind of an area up here to priority number 5 and dig out a little bit more space back here. I'm going to get that going. And now we're just going to unpause the game and see how quickly this happens. So if we click on Salom, our miner here, we can of course see in his personality that he has an iron will and a very good feel for social relationships, a very good focus and the ability to read emotions fairly well. He has a good kinesthetic sense, but has a shortage of patience and a poor empathy. Sounds like a billionaire. And he is emotionally obsessive, forming lifelong attachments, even if they're not returned. That's kind of dark, and has an overbearing personality and tends to think before acting. He has a greedy streak and doesn't mind a little tumult and discord in day-to-day living. Let's follow our friend here while they dig. Come on, Salom. He needs alcohol to get through the working day like any good dwarf and likes working outdoors and only grumbles mildly at crappy weather. As we dig down, you'll see there's a lot of sand here, but exciting news. We have dug through the sand. So if you were to settle somewhere with an aquifer, when the sand and dirt ends, that's where the aquifer usually ends. So we have talc here, which is a type of stone. All of the stones and rock types in Dwarf Fortress are real in real life. So you can actually, with the exception of adamantine, but we don't need to worry about that, are real. So you can go look these up, and they're all relevant. So now that we're digging, we're going to continue digging. As always, if anything in this video seems a little confusing, the Dwarf Fortress wiki is an excellent resource to getting started with Fortress mode. I don't know how quickly it'll get updated, but I'm sure it'll be faster rather than slower. Now, if you dig down too far, you will begin to encounter caverns. These can be scary, but don't be too afraid of them. They're not particularly bad. Our stairs are now completed, so our dwarf is going to dig out this backspace, and as you can see, all of these logs are getting chopped down. So we're going to make a stockpile for these trees. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the Stockpiles button or hit P on the keyboard. Stockpiles button is right down here. Stockpiles then allows us to paint a new stockpile. If we accidentally make it too small, we can simply add on more to it or make it whatever shape we would like. But we're just going to make a stockpile about yay big and then click accept. Now, we have several different options here. If we want to be all fancy, we can go into the custom screen and be very granular with what we want to add. But for this one, we're just going to allow wood. That's all that we're putting here is wood. So the rest of our dwarves are now going to start sprinting around and putting as much of this wood as possible into this location. Ooh, there was some spray there. A tree must have fallen right there. And also, looks like we've found some smoky quartz. Over here on the left side of the screen are your announcements. These are essentially different things that are happening in the world that the game wants you to be aware of. We're continuing to put stuff away, and it looks like it's going quite smoothly. Now we've got this little area right here, which is getting close to being dug out. So we're going to go into the build screen now, and we're going to make ourselves a growing plot. Now keep in mind, if you want to get the maximum efficiency out of growing, you do have to plant your farms in the caverns. And the reason for this is that soil down there is just where the foods that dwarves grow indoors naturally grow. So the soil there is just much more fertile. But for up here, we can still grow. It's just at a smaller amounts, which honestly also means that your dwarves become better at farming because they have to do a lot more of it. So we're going to have to make some decent-sized farm fields, but not huge ones. Now, this isn't an exact science yet. A friend of mine, TechIt, is very good at making detailed tutorials, and I'll definitely be shouting him out once he gets his tutorial on farming finished. But for right now, we're just going to make a farm field around yay big, which is going to be more than enough for our measly party of 7 dwarves. Also, looks like someone's in a good mood. That's always nice to see. So we're going to get that set up. And once they're finished putting all these logs away, a dwarf, oh, no, never mind, a dwarf just sprinted over. Looks like Nil is on the job and is our assigned farmer for this place, who has developed sense of empathy, but is impatient. Well, definitely is impatient to get farming, that's for sure. So we're going to let them continue working on this farm. And pretty quickly, you'll see it build up, and then it's going to become a darker color, and now it's good to go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make a little stockpile right next to this farm. This is going to be a pretty small stockpile, and it has a very specific purpose. You want to have close access to seeds in your stockpile. Or you're going to want to have close access to a seeds stockpile for your farmers so that they don't need to go too far. And this requires some pretty specific settings. At least some of these might be outdated mechanics, as I am playing this and recording this before it's released on Steam, and I haven't seen the exact numbers here, but We'll walk through the way that I've always done it. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to make a custom stockpile real quickly. We're going to select food, and then we are going to select seeds, and we're going to allow all seeds. That is how you make a seed stockpile. Food, seeds, allow all. Okay? Allow all. Pretty simple. And then from here, we are going to click on this barrel, and we are going to move the maximum number of barrels down to 0. This way, instead of storing them in barrels, they'll store them in bags, and I'm not sure if the old barrel bug is still relevant, so just for safety's sake, just going to show you that you can move that number down to 0. And now, they should, pretty quickly, bring all of our seeds out of our wagon and over into this stockpile. Yep, here they come. Look at that. See, we have now bags of seeds. We have dimple cups, rock nuts, sweet pods, and cave wheat, and pigtail, and of course, plump helmets. Now, plump helmets are dwarves' primary food source. Think of it like a burger for your average American, or a sandwich. It's kind of like the food that they just love. You can brew it into alcohol, and you can make it into lunches, and dwarves love them. They'll eat them raw quite happily. However, we are going to make sure that the dwarves are happy and have nice brewed plump helmets and a kitchen. So we're going to do two things really quickly. We are going to jump over here into farming, and we are going to make a still in this construction screen. Now, a still is where alcohol is brewed in Dwarf Fortress. We're going to place this right here, and I'm going to use this nice stone dolomite to build it. Of course, you can use whatever materials you want. The second thing I'm going to build is a carpenter's shop, and there's a reason for that that I will explain in a moment. The carpenter's shop is going to go over here. Actually, let's just plop the carpenter's shop right there. So the carpenter's shop is going to make us barrels, and the still is going to make us alcohol. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the carpenter's shop, and we are simply going to click barrel, or type in BAR for barrel. And we're going to make a couple of these. We don't need too many. Once we have a manager set up, I can show you how to queue these up automatically without having to do them individually, which will make your life a lot easier using work orders. But for right now, that's what we're going to make. And also, it looks like our still is almost done. Perfect. So now that the still is set up, or pretty much set up, now that the still is set up and our carpenter shop is making us some barrels, we have several options and 4 seasons. Now, just to run through our default crops real quick, don't really need to worry about sweet pods. It's made for making sugar. Query bushes are also something you don't need to worry about so much. Plump helmets and pigtails are the 2 most important for us here. And we'll explain why as we go. But for right now, we just want to plant plum helmets in all 4 seasons. They grow around the clock. They're easy to worry about, and they're easy to maintain. So we're going to plant all of our plum helmets just like that. So what we're going to do now that we've got everything set up is we're going to click on the labor menu. We're going to make sure that doesn't pop up again. And we're going to select the kitchen. Now, in the kitchen, we have this obvious thing that's right here. Vegetables, fruit, and leaves. We have a lot of plum helmets, 30-something of them. We do not want to cook them. We only want to brew them. Now, there's a very specific reason for this, and you don't need to worry so much if you are harvesting wild ones from cavern layers. However, because we're going to be focusing mostly on farming these in a shallow farm close to the surface, if you cook them, it cooks the seeds, and you don't get any spawn back, so you can't plant more. If you brew them, you keep the spawn. So we only want to brew plum helmets and eat them raw. And once we get a kitchen set up, that'll be a very important thing to worry about. So just make sure that that's especially if you're planning on staying shallow and not digging too deeply initially, make sure that is one of the first things that you do. Now that we've got all of that complete, we're going to open up our still here by clicking on it, add a new work order, and so we haven't drank enough alcohol to actually require to brew more beer. So we are ahead of it, and we also don't have any new barrels constructed. So let's just let our dwarf here finish making a barrel, which he should almost be done with. Solon here, who we saw earlier, who was actually quite satisfied at work. He also spoke with a friend recently and is quite happy. Let's see. There you go. So now that we have constructed at least one barrel, we can now brew drink from plant. And as you can see, all of our dwarves are planting over here. Then I'm just going to throw this on to repeat. This is kind of the first set of steps that you really need to cover before starting up a fortress. In the next video, we will cover making bedrooms and getting a tavern and a temple set up. Just basics. Nothing super fancy. If this video was helpful to you and you'd like to see more like it, I'm probably streaming on Twitch right now. You can find me at twitch.tv/BLINDIRL. Links down in the description. And if you want to see more of these, keep an eye on the playlist. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.